the burden is there not because it is actually a burden. The burden is there because there's not enough of us. And if we continue to put Black male educators into the schools and into these places, the burdens on the educators that are there, it will become much lighter.
Welcome to the Ask You Telling Our Story podcast. I am your host, Leticia Maldonado, a proud member of the post-secondary value team at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. In this series, we share stories from state colleges and universities that have taken bold steps to foster greater accessibility and affordability for underrepresented communities. We will get an inside look at how they are closing completion gaps, connecting students to viable career opportunities, and creating a more just, equitable society. In this episode of the Ask You Tell Our Story podcast, we'll be discussing the University of Maryland Eastern Shore's Men of Color in Education program and how it's been instrumental in helping Black men realize careers in education. Joining us are Dr. Richard Warren Jr., Hazel Professor of Education and Director of the Men of Color in Education program at UMES, and Mayor Todd Nock, Financial Aid Counselor at UMES, former Men of Color in Education program teacher at North Dorchester County Public Schools, 2020 Business Administration graduate of UMES, and Mayor of Pocomoke City, Maryland. Dr. Warren, Mayor Nock, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Warren, I want to start off with a compelling statistic from the U.S. Department of Education that as of 2018, approximately 7% of public school teachers identified as Black, with Black men accounting for less than 2% of the teacher workforce. Against that backdrop, Dr. Warren, can you tell us about the Men of Color in Education program at UMES, including its three-pronged approach, and what inspired you to create it?
Thank you for that wonderful question. It's not a secret that a lot of individuals aren't pursuing the teaching profession, and specifically, a lot of Black men aren't pursuing the teaching profession. But on the contrary, research shows that having one Black male educator in a public school setting or in schools or in classrooms increases student outcomes academically and socially. It decreases discipline issues and it increases individuals' aspirations to go on to post-secondary college and careers. And so that whole conundrum of it's only less than 2%, but the ones who do make it are highly successful in student outcomes really is the emphasis that we put on this program as far as the three-pronged approach. We want to make sure that there are more Black male educators in schools doing the work and helping students to achieve. And so the three-pronged approach really starts at the high school level, then it goes on to college, and then it goes on into the actual career. The first prong is the high school teacher university. And this is a dual enrollment experience where students in high school take college level classes geared towards teacher preparation. They're surrounded by educators who look like them, mentors, and advisors that can help them along the journey and expose them to the possibilities of what teaching can be. Students come in the summer, they stay in dorms, and they get a chance to understand what it's like to actually be on a college campus and live a college life while being taught the essence of what it means to be a teacher and the skills that they need to make it in college. That's the high school teacher university. The university cohort is individuals who actually decide to major in education and come here at the university. We create spaces, affinity spaces, where we talk about what does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be a Black male? What does it mean to be a Black male educator in schools? And how do we make a difference in the grand scheme of educational landscape? And we go to different conferences. We learn different ways to educate, pedagogical skills. We learn how to network, how to dress professional, about scholarships. We talk about life and how to navigate different issues that come up. And so that is a space that is created for those teacher education majors so that not only can they get to college, they can get through college. And then the last prong is the Man to Shore Network. This is a collection of educators across the Eastern Shore, Black males specifically, who are in the schools already doing the work. I wanted to create a space for them so we can talk about how do we recruit, how do we retain, and how do we make sure we're providing the best experiences for our Black and brown boys in schools so that they can see themselves as educators. I also wanted to create a space where these individuals can lead in the classroom, because one of the things that I noticed, if you're a Black male educator, either you're going to be pushed into administration or you're going to be pushed into or promoted to another position in a role that might necessarily be the best fit for you, but they end up taking it because they want the pay and they want to feed their families. And so I wanted to create a space where, hey, if you love to teach, I can show you a different way to make money and you can still do what you love. And so that's the Man to Shore network. And I gave you the backdrop of the statistics and how impactful they are. But what really inspired me is that I had two educators. I had a high school teacher and I had a Black administrator. My high school teacher, in essence, tore down the barriers and broke things down for me in a way that I could understand it and helped me to graduate with a good enough GPA to get into college. The other person actually invited me back to public schools to become a substitute teacher and to mentor. Well, I didn't originally want to become a teacher, but it was because of Mrs. Heidi, the teacher who helped me, and because of Mr. Taylor, the educator who actually invited me back into schools, is why I'm an educator and a Black male educator. Mr. Taylor was a Black male administrator. Mrs. Heidi was a white female. Both of them played a critical role in why I am who I am. And when I was in schools, I realized the impact that I had as a Black male educator. And I was like, look, I need to be a Mrs. Heidi and impact these students in the classroom for somebody else. But I also need to be a Mr. Taylor to find other young Black men with potential and build them up and support them so that they can do the same thing. Because what I'm coming to understand is that the buck cannot stop with me. If only 2% of the men in education are Black males, that means I got to keep it going once I'm gone.
Now, Mayor Nock, I'd like to turn to you. Can you share your experiences with the UMES Men of Color in Education program and what prompted you to get involved?
When the program really first got started, I was actually entering into the classroom to become a teacher. So working with Dr. Warren that first summer, uh, I didn't I didn't necessarily know how I was going to do things, and he showed me that I would be able to go into my classroom with my own style and with my own methods and my own way of doing things. And I was able to relate to students just from seeing Dr. Warren in action and collaborating with him. So this is really just supposed to be a one summer thing. It was supposed to be something that it was just kind of a paycheck for me. One summer, I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to go. And as time progressed, I realized not only could I do this, but I realized that the students that we were teaching, they could also do this. Much like Dr. Warren, my initial degree was not in education. So I had a lot to learn, but I would attribute a lot of the things that I was able to do in my classroom to Dr. Warren and to the program. So, like I said, I realized that I could do it, and the kids could do it, and that it was a need. I saw the need. And we addressed it. Oftentimes we find people that complain about it. We complain that there aren't enough Black male educators in the classroom. We complain that there aren't enough Black support staff in the schools. So instead of complaining, let's be proactive or even reactive sometimes, and let's get involved.
Thank you. Now, we know from research that many men of color decide against pursuing a career in education because of its low pay, being assigned hard to staff schools in high poverty communities, and serving mainly as disciplinarians rather than content teachers. How do you relate to that?
That was the case for me. Dr. Warren can contest to the days that I called him on my lunch break, and I told him I'm quitting. I got to get out of here. I can't do this anymore, because we are expected to be coach, mentor, referee, sometimes principal. We are expected to do it with the same responsibilities as everyone else in the building, and it can become overwhelming. And that's why the men of color, an education program is so important, because the burden is there not because it is actually a burden. The burden is there because there's not enough of us. And if we continue to put Black male educators into the schools and into these places, the burdens on the educators that are there, it will become much lighter.
Absolutely.
Dr. Warren, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Mayor Knock is a true testament of what this program is designed to do for educators. Not only are we were impacting high schoolers and college students and those who are in the career, like we are literally trying to make sure that we create spaces so that Black male educators know that the work will be taxing, but you have a community that will support you. But also, we come together to figure out how can we talk to school districts? How can we let them know what is needed for us not only to survive, but to thrive in a public school setting? And so we host something called Man the Shore Summit, where we have a panel of experts or a panel of experienced educators, and we talk about these issues, and we talk about all of the different things that are needed in order to keep our Black male educators in the school system, but also in order to help them navigate these different invisible taxes that are placed on them. And so for me, it's one thing to recruit them. It's one thing to get them credentialed. It's a whole nother thing to keep them in the classroom, and a whole nother thing to provide a supportive environment to help them thrive within the school setting. And so this program is now beginning to shape advocacy, an advocacy arm for our Black male educators, because we can have a unit of support amongst ourselves, but if that unit doesn't trickle into school system policies, procedures, and environments, the the leaking faucet will still begin to leak.
So I'm going to ask you to build on that with
Hmm.
the following question, because some people might wonder, why is it important to have Black men as teachers in K through 12, and to take it a step further, Black faculty in higher education as well? So how would you respond to that? And I'd like to start with you, Dr. Warren, and then I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Knock.
Yeah, I'm here because of a Black educator. Honestly, I would not have chosen this path had it not been for a Black male educator actually saying, "Hey, have you ever considered teaching?" I would not have chose this path if it hadn't been for this Black male educator going into the classroom, working with me and showing me how to do things and showing me that I can still be who I am and make a difference. And so when I think about the question that you asked, I think it's imperative that Black male educators are represented. And not only did he show me how to do things, he also showed me that teaching is the most revolutionary act that you can make as a Black male educator. One of the best things you can do is teach a child well. And so for me, without having the representation of Mr. Taylor, the Black male educator, without having the higher education Black males, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to function. I always need somebody who I feel like I can trust in this space. And I have to be able to know that it's possible for me, right? And they are a portrait of possibility for me. Even now in my job as a young professor, I'm looking for somebody who I feel like I can talk to, or who may have gone through similar experiences of me, not so that I can have a pity party, but so that I can move into my purpose and so that I can get the tools that's necessary. Because here's the thing. One thing that I've learned about myself is that I never want to be seen as incompetent. I never want to be seen as a person who cannot do something. And sometimes that requires a certain level of vulnerability to say, hey, I don't have the tools, or hey, I'm not sure of how to do something. Can you teach me? Can you show me? Without any fear of judgment, without any fear of someone looking down on me. And so for me, in order to maximize my intellectual capacity and show all that is within me, it's important to have people who look like me, who can create that space for me and sharpen me to be who I need to be. And so for me, having those representations in public schools and having representation in higher ed really contributes to my overall professional growth.
Mayor Knock?
This program is not just about reaching up and reaching out, but it's also about bearing torches. Who's going to hold the light for these young men once they cross over into college? There are Black male educators in their building that are holding that light, that are carrying that torch for them to see their way out, through K through 12, but we also need people to bear the burden and bear the torches in higher ed.
And just to add something to that, because when you think about the experiences of a lot of Black boys, if they don't have a good experience in high school and they so happen to get accepted into college, it's so pivotal to have a Black representative at the college level to say, hey, baby, you can do this. You know, and for me, for example, like I barely had a good enough GPA to get into college. Going to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore was like my second chance at life, right? And if it had not been for the Black faculty to push me to be like a stepmom or a stepdad and to really show me that I can do it, all of my idiosyncrasies and my incompetencies and my bad experiences that I had in high school would have manifested itself in college. And no one would have been there to help me, right? And so I think there's a certain level of expectations, accountability, and community that is fostered when you have people who actually look like you and care about you. And so if the school system didn't do it, my HBCU did it for me.
I love that. Thank you for that again. Now, before your current roles as director of the Men of Color in Education program and chair of education policy for the state of Maryland, you also taught in the K through 12 system and experienced on a personal level what you have described in the past as the triumphs and challenges that educators face. So, can you elaborate on what you believe are the primary triumphs from pursuing careers in education and how the Men of Color in Education program sets new teachers up for success?
Number one, the primary success is pouring into the lives of our youth. The primary triumph. It's nothing like having a student who you in some way can see yourself in and helping them to get to that next point in their life, whether it means they learned a new concept, whether it means they learned a new skill, whether it means they learned how to relate to each other better, whether it means they did something to help their community, whether it means they passed an assessment. There is nothing like seeing a student come in one way and leaving out another way. The triumph for me is falling in love with the transformation. The triumph for me is building the relationship with a student that will last forever. When I look at a student in their eyes and they look at me and they run up to me and give me a hug and they say thank you, or if I see them in the store and they give me a hug and they say, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Having those moments makes teaching all worth it. That is a triumph for me when the students realize some of their potential and they leave out better than what I found them or better than what they came. That is the primary triumph. The second triumph is you get to work in a school with like-minded people. There has been some colleagues that I've been able to build relationships with that have helped me along the journey, that showed me new skills, that oftentimes when we are in the trenches, I can lean on, right? And naturally, when you think about that, you think about the different conferences and workshops and things that ultimately make you a better teacher. I tell people all the time, one of the most grateful things about education for me is being in a room with people who are just as passionate about education as you. So the triumphs are the student growth, the triumphs are being around other passionate educators. And the also triumph is when those students graduate. I've been around long enough to see students graduate and go into their careers and seeing them thrive as a productive citizen in the world. Listen, I just had a baby, and one of my CNAs that was working in the hospital when I had my little girl was one of my students. She's in school for
Wow.
nursing. She came in and she said, "Hey, Dr. Warren, how are you?" Blah, blah, blah. I had a good conversation. I'm like, man, I taught her in the 8th grade. Now she's a CNA helping me take care of my newborn, right? I went to the bank the other
Wow.
day. One of my students is,
Yeah.
is my banker. And so seeing that is it's weird, but it's also powerful because it's like, man, I treated these students with such dignity, such respect, and I taught them well. And now I'm seeing the fruit of my labor. And it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, you never know what side of the story you're going to be on. So you need to choose the right side of the story because Perhaps they might be helping you take care of yourself when you get older. They might be taking care of your baby for you. They might be handling your money. You never know. You never know what's on the other side of the story. And I'm just so thankful that the triumph is the students who are graduating and working now can now look back and say, Dr. Warren, you were phenomenal. And I can see them work in their element. That's a triumph for me.
Mayor Nock, when we had a conversation in preparation for today's podcast, you also mentioned what it's like when one of your students decides to pursue a career in education. Do you want to share a little bit about that conversation?
So, Dr. Warren and I share a couple of students. And I remember that first year for the Men of Color program with the kids in Dorchester, no one wanted to be a teacher. It wasn't something that they were really interested in. Um, but I'm glad to report that two of the three young men that started that program with us are right here at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore with us, majoring in education. And I can't speak for Dr. Warren in saying this, but it shows that our work was not in vain. It shows that we showed them exactly what we want Black and brown men to show Black and brown boys in the school system. If I can do it, you can do it. If I'm here, you can be here. If I made it, you can make it. And so that's exactly what the program does. And that's what it did. And, they're living testaments that I get to see now in my current role. And Dr. Warren, of course, in his role, we get to see them here every day. We get to see them thriving. We get to see them making us proud. We get to see them using those strategies that we talked about. It makes it all worth it. And it reminds you of those bad times. And, as I like to hear people coin that trouble don't last always. It reminds you of the times where there was trouble. Because it's not just about teaching them. It's about, as Dr. Warren said, being a father when they need a father, being a brother when they need a brother, being an uncle when they need an uncle, being somebody when they need somebody, being what they need. And the fact that you had that great of an impact on them. Because even if they had majored in education, Dr. Warren and I are both proud alums of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. They're here at our alma mater because of what we poured in.
Absolutely.
Mayor Nock, we briefly described your path to becoming a teacher. But as Dr. Warren sometimes says, becoming a teacher is a comma and not necessarily a period. Can you please describe how you continue to stay involved in post secondary education, even during your path to becoming a mayor?
Well, the first thing that I would say is, again, once a teacher, always a teacher. Just because you're no longer in the K through 12 classroom, it doesn't mean that you're not teaching. Um, as long as you're reaching, that's what the goal is. The goal isn't to teach. The goal is actually to reach down and pull up, to reach back and pull forward. So for me, I've always been an advocate for education and educators. I was on the city council when I first started teaching. And then, of course, I ascended to the office of mayor. And I've always been a big voice in the realm of advocacy for education. I've always been a big voice in support of the blueprint in the state of Maryland. And now, in my new role, I have the ability to nurture once they get to their post-secondary level. I remember when Dr. Warren and I had the conversation, and I think that was probably the hardest conversation. The hard conversation wasn't going to be telling my building that I was leaving or telling my coworkers that I was leaving. The hard part of the conversation was actually for me to tell Dr. Warren that I was leaving because we had invested so much into this together. We started when this program started in the county that I worked in. It was a test run, and we made it work and we made it fit. So it was hard for me to go to him and say, "Hey, Dr. Warren, this is what's going on. This is what's happening." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "I know I won't be able to do the program anymore." And he was like, "No, no, no, no. Yes, you are." And he explained to me, this is how we're going to do it now. This is how we're going to work it now. Now, when they get there, you're the money man. This is how we keep them in school. This is how we make sure they get out in 4 years. This is how we make sure that they're not going into debt getting an education. We expect Black and brown men to step into the classroom, but we expect them to go to college and get an education, but that salary that they make the first year does not coincide with the amount of loans that they took out. So now we've added another piece to that. We're able to sit down with them and look at their financials and say, okay, but we need to do this. Can we do this? We need to move this. We need to do these things to make sure that they get in and they get through.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's so inspiring. Now, how do the three smaller programs contribute to the overall success of the Men of Color in Education program?
I mean, when you start for the high school teaching university, you got to start early to recruit. In essence, I would even say we got to start at middle school, because Black boys typically and historically are overly suspended, disproportionately disciplined, not necessarily seen in the curriculum, and you don't really see representation of a lot of Black males in schools. And so the last place that Black boys want to return to is public school, because no one wants to return back to the scene of their trauma, right? And so we have to intervene early on and say, hey, even though you might have not had a good experience, even though you might have not had representation in seeing yourself, even though these things are happening, there are individuals who are great educators out there, and you can be a part of the solution for someone else. And so that conversation needs to happen early on, plant the seed and get it in their head. Like, you know what? Maybe I could be an educator. Maybe I could be a teacher. And what we do is we wanted to create that space in high school where we give them, in essence, an experience that they probably never had before, where they have Black educators, where they have Black mentors, and they have good, high quality educators in front of them. And they're like, man, I never thought I could learn this way. I never thought I could challenge myself and meet this expectation. These are great teachers. I have relationships with them. You know what? Maybe teaching isn't that bad, right? And so that small program is a feeder, is a recruiter for the college level. And when you think about the college level, you have a whole new set of different challenges when they get to college, right? They're trying to figure out how to set their schedule up, time management, how to eat, how to get back and forth. So many different things that they're trying to figure out. And if we could provide a space for them to give them support to help them get through college, that in itself will help them become certified as a teacher. There's a big issue with teacher certification. And so when we think about the small essence of this program at the university, helping them pass their practice exam and get certified and have that wraparound support is critical. And then when they get into the field, it's not enough for them just to get in the field. They got to stay in the field and they got to thrive in the field, right? And so I think this three-prong approach, these smaller programs, are really uniquely designed so that these individuals can feel that support and don't feel like they're on an island.
Now, to the both of you, what advice would you give your fellow Ask You member institutions who may be inspired to bring a similar program to their campus? And how can they reach you for more information regarding the Men of Color in Education program?
Can I answer that one first, Dr. Warren?
Go ahead. Go for it, Mayor Nock.
Call Dr. Warren. Dr. Warren has created the framework. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make the wheel. Reach out. Let him mentor you. Let him tutor you. Let him show you the ways. Let him offer partnership. Reach out to the person that created this program.
Man, I appreciate that, Mayor Nock. Yeah, there's exactly what he said. I would encourage any institution to start a similar program, because the 2% is not just in Maryland. It's not just in Texas. It's not just in Florida. This is everywhere. So if some people want to just subset it to certain groups or populations, no, this is across the United States. And so I would encourage any institution to implement a program as such. But I also, again, just like Mayor Knox said, if someone has a framework, if someone has proven success, if someone has stories that they can share and different nuances, things that took me years to develop, I can give it to you in a couple of minutes. And so you can find me, my email, my number, and I will be glad to show you a framework and partner with you on this and help consult and build you up in a way, because at the end of the day, the main goal is not competition, it's collaboration. And as long as we got more black male educators, effective black male educators going into schools and who are supported, that's a win for us all. And so I ditto and I support exactly what Mayor Nock just said.
Great. Now, to close off, is there anything else that either of you would like to add?
I want everybody to know that our black boys need black male educators. And it's not a shot at any other educator in the system, because all of those teachers are doing the best that they can with what they have, and they are doing great. And I want people to understand that when we talk about having more black male educators in schools, it's not saying the ones that are in schools aren't doing the best that they can or they're not effective. We are just saying that there is something special, something unique, something different that happens when you have that in a school that you cannot overlook. And so for me, I would love for individuals to reach out to me, to ask me questions, to help if they want to build a framework. I would love for individuals, if they know any black male students in schools, if they are exhibit any qualities of a teacher, whether it's leadership, creativity, communication, send them my way. I would love for that to happen. And thank you all for this time and this space to share our thoughts. I'm also extremely, extremely grateful for the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and Dr. Anderson. When I was named State Teacher of the Year, Maryland State Teacher of the Year, in 2019, she was in the audience, and UMES was in the audience, and there's the staff and some of my teachers who trained me. And when I acknowledged UMES as being pivotal in my role of even making State Teacher of the Year, she took upon herself to learn more about me. And the provost at the time learned more about me and my journey. And they created a template to say, hey, if you were to come to UMES, we would love for you to put together a cohort of men of color to go back into the schools and make a difference. And so they created the initial framework. Dr. Anderson, UMES, the provost were very instrumental of reaching out to me and supporting me and saying, hey, I really think that this young man has what it takes to really build something great on the Eastern Shore, for the university. And so Dr. Anderson has been nothing but supportive. And she found a way to make this happen. Her and the provost at the time found a way to make this happen. And it's becoming much, much larger than even the little small cohort that we thought of at first. And it's really getting ready to turn into a center for the recruitment and advancement of educators of color. And so Dr. Anderson has been a huge advocate of making sure that this program stays intact and that the story is told of the beautiful things that are happening on the campus of Maryland Eastern Shore.
Absolutely. Mayor Nock?
You can be whatever you want to be. Sometimes you have to be a teacher. Sometimes you'll want to go into the classroom and you'll want to teach children. You can do that. But then you can always also become a doctor. You can always become a mayor. You can always become a financial aid counselor. The world is our oyster, and there's a whole generation of students, children that look like us, that need us, not only physically, but emotionally, mentally. They need us to show up for them, just as people showed up for us.
Thank you. Now, to close out the show, I want to end with a final audio clip of a student who went through the program and highlights its impact on his life.
It really related to me because it was like you grew up where we come from and you were still able to excel by a teacher helping you, and in return you're helping us.
Now, Dr. Warren, you seemed reflective as you heard the audio of your former student. What was going through your mind?
Man, I see so much of myself in black boys. And it's one of those things where it's like I'm talking to the younger version of myself, or I'm hearing from the younger version of myself. And when I hear stuff like that, it's like I hear hope, I hear destiny, I hear purpose, I hear success. And I'm hearing a Black boy who went through my program speak on it the way that he sees it. And it's like I see so much of myself in them. And it's so powerful because it helps you to realize that what you're doing is so much bigger than you. It's so much bigger than just a program. You are literally helping to shape and mold the trajectory of a Black boy in America. And for me, hearing that was like, my work and our work is not in vain. And it's so special when you hear it from the mouth of the person who you hope to impact. And I said this before, like, you never know what side of the story you're going to be on. And hearing that part in that clip helped me to know that I'm on the right side of the story, that I've done everything and I continue to do everything that I possibly can to put young men like him in the position to succeed.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you to the two of you for joining us today. I am really excited and eager for all of our listeners and Ask You members to listen in and to reach out and hopefully take what they heard today and are inspired. I think it's going to be impossible to listen to the podcast and not be inspired by the work that you've done, Dr. Warren. If you'd like to watch the entire video, it's included in the article, Building a Pipeline of Diverse Teachers for the Next Generation of K through 12 Students, which is available in the Promising Practices section of AskYouTellInAstory.org. To our listeners interested in following up with Dr. Warren and learning more about the Men of Color in Education program and how you could go about starting a similar program, we will include his contact information in our show notes. This has been the Ask You Telling Our Story podcast. As we continue this series, we will share stories from Ask You members who have taken bold steps to successfully support underserved students and their communities. Please get the word out about this important work by sharing this podcast with colleagues, teachers, students, family, and friends. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and many other podcast platforms. If you are an Ask You member with a promising practice that you wish to share, please visit AskYouTellingOurStory.org. Thank you for listening. Until next time.